Hello, everyone. My name is John Bristowe. I'm the Community Director for Octopus Deploy. Thank you for joining us for today's edition of the Octopus 101. This is a monthly series that we do where we kind of kick the tires of Octopus, show you what it's all about, etc. And I'm really happy that you're here to join us and learn more about Octopus, which is awesome. So we do this monthly, as I said. You can find out more up at our site, which I'll show you in a second. But in the meantime, if you happen to have a question at all at any time, you can reach me at this email address. I should also point out that this webinar is being recorded, and we will be posting this recording to our YouTube channel. So if you miss anything at all during today's webinar, don't worry. You can go to our YouTube channel, find a recording of this webinar, as well as all the recordings of all the webinars and videos and all that sort of stuff that we've published. Basically from 6-7 years ago. We've published everything there. That's up on our YouTube channel, so make sure to check that out. So the intent of today's session is to teach you essentially 4 things. The first thing is we're going to look at how Octopus works and why you should use it. So the reason why I think it's important to discuss the not only the workings of how a technology works, but it's really important to understand why you should use it, and we'll set the context for that. The second thing you'll learn is we're going to discuss a bunch of things like fundamental concepts like projects, deployment processes, and releases. These and other sorts of terms you'll learn throughout the course of today's webinar. And the reason why that's important is because as you utilize Octopus more and more and you start using it, these things will become just synonymous with the way in which you work with Octopus. And they are the things that you will create. They are the things that you will modify throughout your use of Octopus. The third thing you'll learn is how to create a deployment process. This is really important, of course, if you want to do deployments with Octopus. It's the core of Octopus itself. And the reason why this is important, of course, is because you want to deploy things. And so defining a deployment process is really critical. And it's really at the heart of what Octopus does. And then finally, we'll show you how you can trigger these deployments through a CI system or continuous integration system such as GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps, TeamCity, etc., to do your deployment. One of the things we'll discuss is how you go about doing deployments, etc. These are done through a CI process initially because basically you start with a build or you start with a series of builds and tests, and then from there you pass control over to Octopus to essentially do your deployment. All right, so those are the 4 things. Hopefully, this webinar will give you all those 4 things and more. And so let's go ahead and get started. So to start, let's talk a little bit about the state of deployments today, or this may be a state of deployments that maybe you're familiar with. So when we talk about deployments, the idea here is that it's pretty easy. On the left-hand side, we have our app, and this is typically a binary, a DLL, something that we want to push out into production. And on the right-hand side are our users. These are the people who want to receive this app or utilize the new features, etc. And you are the person who's really happy on the left-hand side there, the DevOps engineer whose life is easy at this point. So life is really simple. We take our app, we push it out to production, and we're all good. We have also, because we're champions of automation, because we're using computers to do what we want, we've written a bunch of deployment scripts. And those deployment scripts help us push a common set of tasks into production. So life is great. This state of the world is fine. There's no reason why this is a problematic scenario. But as we all know, life and, in some cases, deployment processes get a little bit more complex. And so if we evolve the story here a little bit and talk a little bit about how these things change, obviously we can start to see how life can get pretty difficult. And you'll notice that the smile is no longer present on our face. We're kind of like, frustrated a little bit. So what's happened here is that as our simple or basic deployments have become more complex, life becomes more challenging. And so the idea here is that we may have different versions of our application being pushed out to different types of customers. So in the example here, we may have a customer that is utilizing the app that is an old version, for example. But other types of customers may be on a canary, or they may be on a beta stream, and they want version 2 or higher. You may even also have internal users. These are your development team who are testing internal production cases, or they might be a special set of users that you have that are running version 3. So right out of the box here, you can see that your deployment process that you defined as a script is getting a little bit more complex. We have different targets. We have different types of users. So life is getting pretty challenging. But, as things get evolve, as they always do, life gets particularly challenging. And in this case here, we have a variety of different types of customers, a variety of different types of deployment targets, Kubernetes, websites, on the metal, in cloud, whatever. Life gets really, really tough. And now those deployment scripts that you wrote way back when are no longer sufficient for maintaining the status quo. And so life gets really hard and your head just explodes, as it does here, to try and accommodate everything. So how do we solve this? How do we solve this problem as we grow and as we scale? Well, the answer here is for Octopus Deploy. And of course, we're biased here, but this is essentially what Octopus Deploy is. It's basically a solution that helps you make your complex deployments easy. So the idea here is that deployment is now managed through a single source of truth, Octopus Deploy, and it is essentially your single automation platform for doing all of these deployments. So in a sense, you can think of Octopus Deploy as your source of truth for managing all your deployment processes. And most importantly, you can do that with consistency and compliance. And those are two key aspects of deployment that you need to get right. In the case of consistency, you want to get them right because you need to roll back in case something happens, a failure, for example. Or you may want to make sure that as you evolve and add more environments to your deployments, continue to work and work well. You want them to be robust. And compliance in the sense that whenever you do a change to something, you want to make sure you're tracking those changes, that you're auditing those changes, etc. And so those things are really, really important. And so Octopus Deploy gives you the capability of doing just that. So let's take a second and talk a little bit about a different state of the world, which is what's out there in the ecosystem today. So we have sort of a spectrum of technologies that span everything that goes into your CI/CD pipeline. The way that we like to think of this is that, there are a lot of solved problems out there. So in the case of change management or issue tracking, there's a lot of solutions that are available. Jira is one, but there are many others. In the case of source control or a CI system, there are many solutions out there. I mentioned GitHub, but there are many, many others as well. This is a very, very well-known space. And even in the case of building your solution, the act of compiling, the act of running tests, this is, again, a solution that's very well understood. If we were to skip the deployment stage and focus on where we're going to host this thing, the presence of cloud and the solutions that are out there, there's a whole gamut of solutions that are available for you to use. And again, that is a well-known space. Now, in the middle here, we feel like deployment largely is a space that remains unsolved, obviously, notwithstanding Octopus Deploy. And so this is where we feel like we fit. And so Octopus Deploy complements your pipeline. It's not meant to replace it. It's meant to complement it in a way that provides you can basically take best-in-class solutions and utilize them in the context of this pipeline. And so we feel like CI is mostly solved, but CD, or continuous delivery, is not. And so Octopus Deploy, our mission is to become the enterprise platform solution for CD. And that also speaks to the fact that there are many parts of this pipeline that I mentioned earlier. Like, it doesn't have to be GitHub. It doesn't have to be Azure. It can be other solutions out there, such as TeamCity, or Jenkins is very popular, for example. There are many, many others, as well as other cloud providers. So Octopus Deploy can speak to all of them. And incidentally, there are other things that go into a pipeline as well. Infrastructure provisioning via Terraform from HashiCorp is another solution that's used quite heavily. We actually integrate with Terraform. We have a Terraform provider. We can also call Terraform from your deployment process as well if you want to stand up infrastructure. There are other also solutions out there. An example of this might be ServiceNow. So ServiceNow is an ITSM solution. There are many capabilities to ServiceNow, but the ITSM capability of ServiceNow is something that allows you to approve changes, for example. We integrate with that. There are many other ITSM solutions and other solutions that complement this pipeline as well that we also integrate. So those are things that you can take a look at and utilize in the context of Octopus as well to basically provide your best of breed pipeline. All right, that's enough talking. Let's go ahead and jump into a demo. So for this intent, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Chrome. Now, if you haven't seen Octopus Deploy, or maybe this is your first time visiting octopus.com, that's fine. This is our website here. If you go ahead and visit octopus.com, you see a site that looks like this. And I love this graphic. This graphic allows us to basically summarize what I've just talked about in the last 10 minutes. So on the left-hand side, we have our CI solutions. On the right-hand side, we have our targets. And in the middle, Octopus Deploy is doing its thing. And so we try and represent that very easily for you to understand. So CI on the left, deployment targets on the right. In the middle, CD, or continuous deployment, is where we act. So if you take a look at this site, you can check out what's on offer there. We have many, many resources. I'll talk a little bit about these at the end as well, but everything is linked off of our site. This is Octopus Deploy. This is my instance that I use for doing demonstrations, etc. But basically, this is your dashboard. And the dashboard is your starting place for all things Octopus. When you sign into Octopus Deploy, you'll see a dashboard that looks like this. And you're going to see a variety of projects listed here. So you can see here we have our default project group, and we have a couple of projects here, one called backend database, one called website. There are other types of project groups I may list. On the left-hand side here, we have a variety of other things that we can work with. So we have things like tenants, variable sets. We have things like deployment targets and workers, etc. These and other things, we're not going to talk about all of them today, but these and other things are available directly from within this dashboard. So it's basically a one-stop shop for all things Octopus. Now, to get things started, I'm going to show you also one thing here. This is a drop-down list that gives me access to what are called spaces. Spaces are an isolation boundary. This is really useful if, let's say, you have multiple teams in your organization using Octopus, and you want to kind of separate concerns or separate projects from each other. You do so using a space. And I'm going to go ahead and create one because I want to show you what the out-of-the-box experience is for this. Don't worry, we'll talk a little bit about, more elaborate solutions or more elaborate scenarios rather in the future. And so I'm going to go ahead and create this space called Octopus 101. You can see it's been created there. Let's go back to my dashboard and let me now switch to that space. So here is a blank, file new, whatever project. This is a new space within Octopus. So let's go ahead and deploy our first application. Now, when we do this, you can start by, watching a video, which we have, or you can click our Getting Started. What we're going to do here is we're going to basically show you all the parts and pieces of Octopus within this Getting Started experience. So the first thing we have to do is we have to create a new project. So a project is a collection of your deployment processes. Typically, you'll have a one-to-one relationship between projects and an application that you're deploying constantly. So let's say, for example, I have a series of microservices and I have a website, etc. These and other things I can utilize in that context within a project. And I'll go ahead and call this Hello Octopus. One of the options that I have available here is to be able to specify version control. So I have the option, if I so wish, to say, listen, the settings for this project, everything that I'm going to be doing within this project, I want to write that to a text file, and I want that text file to live in source control. And the reason why people want this is because it allows you to control the process through commits. You can also see the file directly within your VCS or version control system. This can be backed by GitHub, for example. But if you don't specify that, it just gets written to our database. I'm going to go ahead and leave that unmarked for now. You also have some other options here to specify which group this falls under, etc. We'll set them at the default, and we'll just click Save. Now, at this point, it's going to say, well, listen, okay, when we do a deployment, you're going to target a number of what are called environments. Environments are, they are the way in which you define or think about where you're deploying to. In Octopus, we support deployments to a variety of environments. And the reason why this is, really useful is because obviously in developer shops, you're going to deploy to things like staging or things like development. Based on your needs, based on when you're doing deployments, where they're going. And so you'll define these environments. You have to define one, and you have to give them names. Now, we give you 3 canonical sort of names here, but you can call these things anything you want. And they don't have to map to servers, etc. They're just ways in which of thinking about how these environments look. So we'll click on Save. And now, this is where we get into the sort of meat and potatoes of Octopus. Now we're inside our deployment process. This is where we define what are called a series of steps to define our deployment process. So a deployment process is a collection of steps that you run that constitutes that deployment process. So let's go ahead and create one. And so we're going to be dropped into the process editor. And this is really where you start to see the power of Octopus. So the process editor here is exposing to me all the steps that are built in of Octopus. Don't worry, we have steps that are built by the community as well. If we don't have a step for you, don't worry. There's chances are a step has been written by a member of the community. But you can see here, these are all been classified by category. So we have popular ones like run a script. If you want full control, you can just say, look, let me just take the wheel and I'll do something here. We have other steps as well, like performing kubectl if I'm doing deployments to Kubernetes, for example. We also have ones that integrate natively with cloud providers. So here's some steps for AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. If you're doing steps that want to target Kubernetes, we have a lot of Kubernetes steps there. So if I wanted to deploy a Helm chart, for example, I can do that. We also have some more legacy steps as well. These are ones that we're well known for, like deploying to IIS, deploying to Tomcat, etc., deploying to Apache. There are a variety of steps that you can use. And in addition, as I mentioned earlier, there are a whole host of community steps as well. So if there's a step that we haven't written, don't worry. The chances are there's a step for you somewhere here that you can use. And so these are all the building blocks that you construct a deployment process with. Now, let's go ahead and run a script here. This is a very basic step, but the reason why I'm adding it is to basically show you how this works. So when I add this step, you'll notice it shows up here in the well. And in this well, you'll see me populate this here with steps. These are basically constructing my deployment process for me. So to kind of give you a lay of the land, all steps that you add to a deployment process are going to have a variety of properties associated with them. So I know this looks a little bit daunting, but don't worry. All these conditions, all these steps that you see, all these settings that you see here for this step allow you to control how it executes, who executes it, when, etc. And that's essentially how this operates in the context of Octopus when running these things. Sorry, there was a question. I just want to make sure I am answering your questions here live. So there's a question here that says, how do you have that view? My dashboard looks different. Which version of Octopus has this view? So just to point out, there's a new view that's coming soon. You'll see these listed in your notifications section up here. So if you click on that bell, you'll see some notifications that may indicate that your new UI is coming. But because to prove that this is live, yes, this is a new view that we have. If you want to read more about what's coming, sorry, I know this is a bit of a little change, but that's okay. We'll go with it. So if you go to roadmap.octopus.com. This is a website where we publish all the changes that are being either under consideration, planned, or released. And one of the ones that we're changing to is a new UI. We have this new vertical navigation. If you're a cloud customer, good news, you're already seeing this. And I am running a cloud instance here. That might be the reason why you may be hosting this yourself. I should mention that Octopus can be either hosted or it can be provisioned up in the cloud, and that's what I'm using here. I'm using a cloud instance. That might be the reason why you're not seeing the new UI, but that's okay. It will be with you soon. So there you go. So this new UI has just got some little bit of changes. Anyways, getting back to the process. Hopefully that answered your question. So our process here is a collection of steps, and as I said before, steps have all these various knobs and buttons that you can tweak. So I can say things like, which environments do I want this step to run in? Are there any conditions I want to specify on this step? So I want it to only run when the previous step succeeded. I want it to always run, or I want it to be variable. I only want it to run in certain conditions. So these and other settings you can specify. I can also specify things like retries. I can specify things like timeouts. The reason why we specify these conditions is because sometimes you're dealing with servers. Let's say you're doing a step that's conveying or doing action with a server that's remote. There's latency, there's network. You can't control what's happening on the network. And so as a result, there's things that you can't control. So you may want to do a timeout or a retry. A timeout allows you to say basically like, look, if it doesn't work or wait for a period of time until you deem it to have failed. And that's something that's super important. So these and other conditions you can specify within these properties. Sorry, we've got a update here. So it did make sense. We are on-prem. There you go. And thanks for answering the question. No problem. This is a live webinar, so there you go. Awesome. So inside here, we'll define, again, we're running a script. So this is something where we'll go ahead and run a script, and we can specify, lots of properties for this. We can say that the script is running remotely. The script may be executing in the confines of some other environment. And so if I wanted to, I could actually, do all kinds of things in here for the run a script step. So if I wanted to, I could specify this in a variety of languages. So you can see here out of the box, we support PowerShell, we support Bash and other environments as well, which is great. And the reason why this is important is because some people are just comfortable in working inside of environments that utilize different scripts, languages, which is awesome. So here I'm going to specify PowerShell, and if I wanted to, I could basically write anything I want. But let me go ahead and just utilize this environment and say, I'm going to output to the console, which is like write host. So I'll say hello using PowerShell. Something I have to mention here is we also have support for inline variables. So variables are a really powerful mechanism of Octopus, because it allows me to inject values that may change during the execution of my deployment process. And so this is a really powerful mechanism that you can use. I'm not going to utilize this here, but these and other aspects I'm going to go ahead and specify. Now, one of the things that we do is we validate your settings when you click on save, for example. So you can see here when I click on save, it says you have a problem here. You have to specify one or more target tags that this will apply to. Now, a target tag allows you to specify where this is going to execute on. Now, I haven't defined a target tag, but I'll just go ahead and say specify hello Octopus, and I'll create it in line here. Target tags allow me to specify where this is going to run. Tags are just that. There's like little pieces of semantic information that allow me to control how deployments work. So just so you know, we give you sort of a guided failure mode, if you will, for doing validation of your deployment processes. So as you define these things, we're validating along the way. Okay, great. So we've saved that, updates have detailed, and we've got now a deployment process that has run a script as part of it. Now, just to fast forward, before I run this, I just want to fast forward a little bit and show you some more elaborate examples of what these things might look like when you start defining them, a little bit more complicated examples. So here's an example where we're doing a communication via Slack. So we're sending a message to Slack saying, hey, a deployment's running. We're communicating with MySQL. We're running a tool called Flyway, which is from Redgate. We're doing health checks. We're doing a deployment to Azure Web, Azure Web App deployment. We're doing some custom branding to it through a script step, and then we're doing Slack notifications whether it succeeded or failed. So this is what a more elaborate example would look like, just to give it some context there. We have another question here just from Mark, who asks, we have a number of products being deployed by Octopus, so it is best to use individual spaces per product, or individual products. It's really up to you. The thing about spaces is they give you a nice isolation boundary. So you can use that if you want to isolate users from each other. And the reason why that comes into play is because we have an elaborate permissions set model. So you can define permissions across this. You can give permissions to space admins, etc. It really depends on how you want to customize it. We have customers who have only one space and all kinds of products. We have other customers who use other types of spaces. One benefit of utilizing multiple projects in a single space is, of course, is the permission model is a little bit simpler that way. You don't have to worry about space admins, etc. It also is the case that you might be able to interact with a little bit more easily that may leverage, for example, different projects with each other. So there you go. Another question here, can we have some demos in the future that shows the benefits of using tenants with details and live examples, please? Absolutely. Absolutely. We actually have some recordings up on our YouTube page. We've talked about tenants at great detail. That's a great idea. Let's definitely do something in the future. I'll see if we can do something specifically around tenants in the future. I do have an example that highlights that. So if you want, and you can kick the tires yourself for some of these things. So we have a samples instance that you can use. This is live, by the way. So if you go to samples.octopus.app, you can sign in here as a guest, and you can take a look at a variety of different patterns that we have built in here. These are all the spaces that target different patterns. And you can see these and kick the tires yourself if you so wish. And we have a pattern here that mocks out or basically maps out how tenants are working. Tenants are, for lack of a better term, are basically the way in which you think about how you do your deployments across a variety of different geographies, for example. So let's say, for example, and the one that we commonly refer to is, let's say you're running a series of pet clinics, or you have a series of shopping malls, or you have a bank and it's geo-distributed across your country. You can define tenants across that application and deploy different versions of your app to those tenants. So a tenant, by example, is like something that is, in most cases, like a physically different instance for your deployment. And they can represent a type of customer that you have out there that is geo-located, for example. But they don't have to be. They can be a different type of user that you want. And tenants allow you to find those types of users and deploy to them. We also have concepts called tenant tags as well that talk a little bit about this. Great question. Yeah, we'll see if we can do some live demos of that. Great question. Thank you. So anyways, getting back to our deployment, just want to show you what this looks like when you actually do it. And again, this could be a super elaborate example, but I'm not going to worry about that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go up here. I'm going to click this button that says Create Release. So what we're not doing here is actually doing the deployment. What we're doing here is we're creating a snapshot of life as we know it when it comes to the deployment process. The reason why this is important, remember earlier when in my slides I talked a little bit about how you want your deployments to be consistent and robust. That's what this does. When you create a snapshot of your deployment, what you're saying is this is a frozen set of a version, release notes, etc. that basically represent this deployment, this release, and I can consistently use that across environments. One of the things that you'll commonly trip up against when you're doing deployments yourself, you're rolling your own deployments, is when you run your deployment scripts and you move them between environments, things change, right? You've got different config values, you've got different databases, you've got different passwords, you've got different things that are involved. You've got different release notes. These and other things can change between releases, and you don't want those things to change. And the reason why is because as you move them or migrate them between environments, you want them to stay consistent. So the reason why we create a snapshot here, which we call release, is to preserve basically the integrity of what we have written into our deployment process. So here you can see we defined a variety of things like what packages we're going to use. Now, I haven't used a package. I haven't gone so far as creating that, but a package is like, what are the binaries that I'm using for my application, like the DLLs, the exes, the whatever it is I need, the configuration scripts, whatever, zip archives, etc. All the stuff that goes into the physical files, the virtual files that I use for this release, all the variables that I'm using. Now, with deployments, you can get a lot of variables involved. And so we take a snapshot of those variables along with everything else, and we create a release as part of it. Now, at this point, once we have the release, we are ready to deploy. And so you can see here at the top right-hand corner, we have this ability to say, yep, we want to go ahead and deploy this thing to either development or somewhere else. So I'm going to go ahead and choose to deploy this. Now, when I make this choice, you'll notice here I can specify what environments this deployment is going to go to. I can also specify when I want this deployment to occur. So I can say now or later, so I can schedule these things. I could also give it priority, which is an early access feature. This is something we talked about on our roadmap. So you'll find it listed, I think it's in the release section. Where is it now? Actually, we can do a search. Priority? Might be priority. Oh, it might be, yeah. There's a variety of, also you can reschedule these things. It has to do with priority. It may not be, we have to prioritize deployments here. So the idea is I can give these things priority. This is under, it's classified as planned, but it's under early release right now. But in our roadmap, we talk a little bit about how sometimes, let's say, for example, you want to get a release out really quickly. You can give it a high priority, for example. And so that's what that value allows you to specify. You can also rearrange the way in which these deployments are going once they're in the queue as well. So just, I know I'm branching out to a variety of different scenarios, but it's important to mention these things as we're looking at them. I can also, if I want, I can specify which steps I want to exclude. I can go in here and say, you know what, that run a script step, and I might have like 10, 100 steps here. I don't want to run that one. You can also designate as part of this deployment certain conditions that need to be met for this step to run. And I mentioned that earlier when looking at all the property values here. So all these things I can go ahead and choose and pick and choose. And then I can say, yep, I'm ready for deployment. And we'll go ahead and do that. So we're doing a deployment here. Now remember, my deployment didn't do anything magical. It just simply ran out and executed a change here. And so once that deployment has finished, we'll get this nice little dialogue, etc. Now, typically, you're going to just execute this in the context of a run and execution here. And what we've done is we've just simply executed this here as part of this. Now, this has been skipped because we don't have any matching targets here because we've just provisioned this very simply. But as we take a look at more examples here, like if we jump over here, for example, and take a look at some deployments that have occurred, when you do a deployment and it's executed well in the dashboard, coming back to the dashboard, you'll see those deployments listed here. So again, the reason why the dashboard is really powerful is because it gives you access to all the versions that have gone in. So if we take a look at the execution of this deployment, which is a much more elaborate example, you can see all the steps have successfully run. You can also get a task log. You can drill down in here and see the task log of everything that's executed. You can change the verbosity of this. So you can say, yeah, show me a lot more of what's occurred under the covers. So you can get visibility and you can audit what occurred. You can also see things like the history. So this gives you the execution context of who ran this and when. You can also see changes if those are integrated as well, along with build information, which is what are the changes that went into source control that correlate with this change. So this is really, really important because if you're wanting to do release notes and you want to correlate those to closed issues, for example, let's say you're using GitHub and you're using PRs that correlate to changes that are in issues. So if you want to close issues, those will show up here if you integrate them. And it will allow you to say, yep, all these changes went into this release. We have another question here. All the questions coming in fast and furious. Are there pros to being on cloud versus on-prem? We noticed choosing version control didn't play nice when we created our test project on-prem. Oh, that's unfortunate. Sorry to hear that. Yes, the big advantage, of course, is we tend to ship to cloud first before on-prem. The other one, of course, is we host the infrastructure for you, so you don't have to worry about it. But we typically deploy to our cloud customers first, well in advance of our on-prem. The reason for that is because we have a known quantity when shipping to cloud. We control the environment. We're able to obviously get that out. And we also use it as a test bed. But if you're looking for advantages, these are two right off the top of my head. Obviously, we host that infrastructure for you. And then also you get the features earlier. There are others as well, but I'm a fan of cloud. So yeah, take that for what it is. Awesome. So just to come back to deployment, this is what we've done. We've gone ahead and issued our deployment in context here. Now, that is the demo. That is the hello Octopus, but there's other demos I'm going to show you. But to kind of set the stage here, what you've seen is you've seen a deployment process, which we represent visually. And as I said before, a deployment process is simply a collection of steps that occur to do your deployment. Now, those steps can have conditions associated with them, as I said before. You can have features like child steps as well. So child steps allow you to control branching capabilities within your deployment process. So you can say, if this occurs, run these steps, etc. You can also have steps run in parallel. So you can have it fork and have them run at the same time, for example. So there's lots of capabilities there. We have integrated markdown notes. This is really good if you're sharing information around the deployment process itself. As I mentioned before, you can do parallel step execution. We also have environment labels that are surfaced out as well. This is really important if you're doing deployments that are variable based on the environment that they're targeting. What these labels allow you to do is they basically say this will run only in the context of staging, or this will run only in the context of production. This is really important because sometimes you don't want certain steps to run in certain environments. Now, to kind of answer or close out the question why, there's a couple of slides here I just wanted to mention. So another reason why you use Octopus is because you want your deployments to be reliable. You don't want to rely upon, sorry, I'm using a double in the definition. I'm using another term that is the same term. You want them to be robust and reliable. The reason why is because When things change, when things differ, or new processes are added, or say you're migrating from one environment to the next, you don't want to have you don't want to second guess yourself as a DevOps engineer as to whether or not these deployments will succeed or fail. And further to that, you also want to have the ability to roll those changes back. So this is a capability that is built into Octopus, the ability to roll back changes within Octopus. So if a deployment fails, for example, you can roll back those changes and revert to the previous version. You can also automate that process as well. We have capabilities built into Octopus that allow you to do things like, if something fails along the way, we have a feature called guided failure mode, which will stop the execution, allow you to resolve it inline if you want. Sort of kind of like a debugger you would see in an IDE. So these and other capabilities are a really important reason why you use Octopus. Another thing that you can do, and we haven't mentioned this yet, is we have a capability called runbooks that is integrated within Octopus itself. And what this allows you to do is basically pair up with your DevOps team or your operations team to perform tasks that you would typically run against your infrastructure. Some examples might be back up the database, or update the web server, or clean up any old log files that I have kicking around. These and other types of operation things you can define just like a deployment process and run them and pair them up with your DevOps other operations you want to run. The other thing is, if you're targeting containers, Octopus is a really solid solution for executing against Kubernetes, for example. So we have integration with YAML, we have integration with Helm, and we can surface these out in a very nice UI, which you've seen already. Again, if you're running on cloud, you'll get the new version of the UI. And then I mentioned tenants before, but tenants are a really, really powerful capability. Multi-tenancy, which is what we call it, is a really, really powerful capability of Octopus, because essentially what it allows you to do is target different versions of your app to different types of tenants. A tenant is basically like that type of user, or based on a variety of criteria, which could be physical location or geo, for example. We typically see a lot of customers who have a more mature usage of Octopus, like customers who have been using Octopus for many, many months and years, tend to gravitate towards tenants, and then they never go back. They're like, multi-tenancy is the best feature ever. And so that's the reason why I mention it here, is because I think it's a core aspect of Octopus. Of course, this being an Octopus 101 webinar, it's always tricky to kind of show you everything because it's pretty elaborate. But to the point that was made earlier by the comment, maybe we should have a session dedicated solely onto tenancy. But we do have videos there. But there you go. Another thing that is important is, of course, risk, governance, and compliance. These are core capabilities of anything that you're doing around deployments. We want to know who did what and when and why. These and other aspects are audited within the product itself. So you can see who did the deployment, for example. This also speaks to integrations with, say, for example, Jira Service Management or ServiceNow. ITSM solutions like these are really, really important, because they allow you to basically act as the governor or the controller of when a deployment goes out. And because we integrate this, you can kick off the deployment based on an approval that goes in through, say, ServiceNow. So we won't do a deployment until you tell us through ServiceNow to do that deployment. So these and other capabilities are really important. Now, before I go into another demo, I've got another question here. Let's see here. The last question that bugged me for the past 7 years is that I used Octopus. How can I isolate the audit trail for one process step? I want what changes were made to a certain step and not the whole project. That's a great piece of feedback. So jumping into the demo here, just to show you what the audit trail, you saw a little bit about this on a deployment process itself. You can collapse and expand them, for example. You can also search against the audit trail itself. We also provide capabilities to search against. So this is the audit trail here that's provided here. You can also stream this out. We have a bunch of advanced filters. So I don't know if you've looked at these, but you can. I know that you want to drill down based on a particular step, which can get very elaborate, but you can drill down based on a project here. So I could say I only want to see the ones that are for, say, this project here called car rental. You can see we have a bunch of filters here. I'm just thinking about how you might do this for a step. I don't know if you can, unfortunately. That seems like a very, very granular sort of way about going about that. You can export these if it makes any difference, and then do a search against that. But because of the list of filters we have here, you know what? That would be a good point to make here. Why not submit your idea? Sorry, I know it's a bit of a cop-out. But you can submit an idea directly to the roadmap. If you feel like this is important to you, I'd like to be able to drill down based on the step. The reason why I'm thinking it's going to be a challenge is because the number of steps that if you had a filter here, the number of steps that we would have to drill down into would be immense. Because we have customers who have lots and lots of projects, and to be able to drill down into a per step basis might be tricky. So I know it's passing the buck here, but please feel free to submit your request here to roadmap.octopus.com. Sorry, I wish I had a better answer for you, but that's a great idea. Let's see what the product team thinks. Go ahead and submit your idea. This goes directly to the product team, and submit it there. To submit your idea, just go to this blue button in the top right-hand corner. That's how you submit your idea. Great question. Awesome. Let me hide that. There you go. All right, so let's take a look at some more elaborate examples here. So jumping back to my other Octopus instance. So one of the questions that comes up is like, how do I actually execute these things if I'm doing this through an automation? Like, say, for example, a CI process. So a CI process is typically something that looks like this. So we'll have, sorry for the contrast change here. Typically in GitHub, you'll have a GitHub file. This is using YAML. YAML is, it is what it is. So YAML is a text-based format that allows you to define a workflow within the confines of GitHub. This is just showing one example. There are many other CI processes. And GitHub uses a collection of what are called actions to do its work. So a collection, just like steps are used in a collection to define a deployment process in Octopus, actions define is the collection that defines essentially a workflow. And so you can see here we have a bunch of actions listed. So we can run actions like run the CLI for .NET, or perform changes here to my virtual directory, like make a directory, for example. Down here at the bottom, we have some actions for Octopus deploy. In fact, these actions are available through the GitHub Marketplace. So if you go to github.com/marketplace and you do a search for Octopus, for example, here you'll find all the actions that we have available. We have other things as well, but these and other actions you can use in the confines of your workflow defined in GitHub, for example, in this instance. And you can do things like run a runbook, or create a release, or push build information, or deploy a release. So this is essentially how you tie those two worlds together. After you've done your build, which is all this stuff that I've highlighted here, so you've run your tests, you've done your compilation, you've run your tests, you're ready to now get this thing out there and deploy it. Once you've done that, then you can utilize one of our many actions, and you can do it to push a package up. Again, remember, a package is like a binary or something you want to deploy, like a zip archive, something like that. And then I want to go ahead and create and deploy a release. These actions here that we've defined will allow you to do just that. And so they're doing those actions. They're performing those. Sorry, I got to watch my terms. They are performing the operations I just showed you in the Octopus dashboard, which is create a release, create a deployment, etc. Those and other types of actions you're doing in the confines of this automation. Now, this is in the confines of GitHub, but you can certainly do this elsewhere. So here is, for example, Azure DevOps. So Azure DevOps gives you a different view. They look largely the same, to be honest. And we have an integration here that I can utilize through this WYSIWYG if you want, or I can use YAML. So Azure DevOps has started moving towards YAML more and more, and it's in fact their default view. So if I didn't want to show the YAML here, I just wanted to show you what this looks like in another UI. But if I wanted to, I could certainly create releases as part of my pipeline. So in Azure DevOps, they call them pipelines, or Azure pipelines. In GitHub, they're called GitHub Actions. It's the same thing, basically. It's a series of steps I want to do for my CI. If I'm running TeamCity, if I'm running Jenkins, if I'm running, name a CI server or process out there, it's going to be largely the same story. And so the integration that we have allows you to kick off that action. And when you do that, these show up in the actions section here. So these are all the runs that have been done for this repo. So again, I'm switching back to GitHub. But inside here, these are all the runs that I've done for anything related to my GitHub repository here. And if I wanted to, I could simply drill down into the one that I'm utilizing here. And if I have one here that I want to run, I can go ahead and view its summary. One of the things that we do, which is kind of cool, we actually show you a resulting. There's this new feature in what's new. It was introduced last year. Basically, it allows you to augment the build summary. And so we said, yeah, we're going to use that. So we now tell you things like what artifacts were pushed to Octopus deploy, what was the release that was created, etc. So these and other types of annotations we give you as part of the run when you take a look at the run itself. And you can see these evident here. If you haven't seen this before, don't worry. This is basically like in Octopus when I showed you the audit log. This is like the audit log for GitHub Actions. So you can see here, this is where we ran our action called create and deploy release. And you can take a look at all the values that are in here, for example, and you can see that we've successfully done that. So this is how we integrate as part of that scenario when integrating with the CI process. Now, you could spend any amount of time here talking about this. It's pretty convoluted because it differs upon, it depends on the type of integration you're talking about here. But this is the way in which you might do it via GitHub. And you'll kick those things off and communicate through a variety of means. We have now a GitHub app. You'll find this up on the marketplace. So we have a bunch of things in here as part of this, but we have now a GitHub app. So if you take a look at the apps that we have here, these are built-in scenarios for a variety of products, and you can do a search here for Octopus if you wanted. And I could take a look at, there's our app there. If you install this app, this allows you to do deployments automatically, basically, without the need for API keys, etc., etc. That's one way to do it. Of course, you can use our actions as well if you wanted to. So those are there. And then, incidentally, we also have our Copilot extension. We were part of the Copilot extension launch, so ours is listed there. So that's, again, through all the marketplace. But that's essentially how you'll get started, is through the integration there. Awesome. So there's a lot more for me to show, believe me, but I am cognizant of time. So I just wanted to just kind of show you, this is the intent of this webinar, is to kind of wet your whistle, to kind of give you a sense of what it's like to utilize Octopus in a very, very trivial but interesting way. Again, remember, the most important things to take away is we provide for you a dashboard. Number one feature that customers love. Give me a place where I can just see what is the state of my deployments across my environments. That's what we give you. Some of the dashboards I've seen from customers are awesome. They look like you're managing like this just supercomputer of different environments, etc. But basically gives you this one-stop shop to see what are the states of my deployments. It allows you to define a deployment process very simply. We also give you other things as well. We give you things like insights. So insights are the ability to view data related to your deployments. And so, for example, there are these things called DORA metrics. Again, I don't have time to talk about all this, but just to show you quickly, DORA metrics allow you they define a series of 4 categories for things like deployment frequency, lead time, failure rate, and mean time to recovery. These things are important because over time, you'll get a sense of how Octopus is helping you target these values. And if you're doing well as an organization around continuous delivery, you should see these things either going down and to the right or up and to the right, depending upon what you're looking for. So mean time recovery, you definitely want this to be low. This is the average time it takes for you to recover from a failure. So if something goes down, you want to make sure that those values, the number of days, are as low as possible. There's other things as well, like how often you deploy. Ideally, you may want to see this go up and to the right. You want to do more deployments more often. We're big advocates of that. Deployment lead time, these and other sort of metrics we track for you as part of our integration with Insights. Now, if you're all curious, there are other ways in which Octopus integrates or plays well with others. You can find these up at our website, which is at octopus.com/integrations. If you go to this is a new page that we've just shipped. If you go to this page, you'll see a page that looks like this. We not only show you all those steps that are built by the community, but also integrations with things like GitHub, which I showed you earlier. So you can drill down on these and get a sense of what these things do. So here we have community steps, for example, how they work, etc. But there's other ways in which you can explore Octopus through those integrations. I mentioned the website as well, octopus.com. You'll find out more information there. And to that end, let me just share with you a couple more resources. So another resource might be /webinars. So if you go to /webinars. You'll see a series of webinars that we are going to be hosting soon. This is a really good way for you to stay afloat or stay up to speed as to everything that's going on relative to Octopus Deploy. And so we're doing the 101 right now, as you can see, but as you may note, we have some other webinars that are coming up soon. So in particular, we have this one being hosted by a partner of ours, DevTools, entitled Kubernetes Deployment Strategies, Shifting from Jenkins to Modern CD. We also have Bob and Dan talking to Chris Perillo, yes, the Chris Perillo, over at the New Stack, talking about a leader's guide to Kubernetes CD at scale. So these and other resources you can find at /webinars. There is an event coming up that I encourage you to register for called Shipped. Shipped is our annual virtual event. We've got 68 days until it occurs, but if you're looking to get information about these and other types of topics, November 20th and 21st, we're running this virtual event. It's a 2-day event where we're going to have a bunch of folks talking about all sorts of things related to Octopus and CodeFresh, etc. And if you're interested, you can also submit a speaker section. We're just about to wrap this up, but we've got a bunch of ways in which you can tell us, like, hey, I do a lot of cool stuff with Octopus. You can submit a session. We've got an open sessionize there, which you can check out. So again, that's octopus.com/shipped. There are a bunch of other resources to check out as well. We've got white papers. We've got a whole bunch of things as well that may tickle your fancy, for example. And finally, we also have our YouTube channel. This is at /octopusdeploy. Here you'll find a page that looks like this. You can see all the videos that we publish. We've done a bunch of ones here around tenants or tenancy. Let's see if we get it. So multi-tenancy, talk about tenancy here. That was a question that came up a lot. So you can check out our videos there. We do a weekly show called Deploy on Friday, which I would encourage you to check out as well. We do the news of the week. These and other types of topics we do all the time. And we have other instances of Octopus 101 as well. So make sure to check those things out. Awesome. Thank you for answering my questions. No problem. I love Octopus. Thanks for this session. No problem. That's what I'm here for. I'm happy to help. Question here from Mark. Can Octopus Deploy help me get metrics on Dora? Yes, so we integrate that through our insights. So here with insights, this is a feature you have to enable. But with insights, we track those and generate reports based off of that. And so we automatically generate these reports based on these Dora metrics here. You set these up based on what projects you wish to track. So you'll give it a list of projects you wish to track as part of this. And then we start compiling that data if you have this capability built in. I say if because it's not by default. Depends on your instance. So that's something that you can turn on for sure. It's available here on the left-hand side of your new UI, hopefully. If you have the old UI, it's still there. It's on the left-hand side, but if I believe from memory, it's down below. So there you go. Great question. Awesome. All right. So just to wrap things up, let me just switch over to my slides here. All right. So what you learned during the webinar, hopefully. So you learned a little bit about how Octopus works and why you should use it. I think I spent a lot of time talking about that. You learned about some fundamentals, such as what is a project, what is a deployment process, what is a release. Remember, it's a snapshot. It's important. I showed you how to create a deployment process. And finally, we saw how you can trigger those. And I showed you Azure DevOps and GitHub and lots of ways to trigger these. You can trigger them yourself. We have a CLI. You can target the API. Lots of ways in which you can trigger these automations. As I mentioned before, there's so many community steps. There's like hundreds and hundreds of community steps that you can integrate with. If there's something that we don't have built in out of the box, chances are our community has built something. And you can build these yourself as well. So these are being updated and built all the time. We have a very active community around this. You can download a copy of Octopus now. You can also trial a cloud instance. Let me just show you what that looks like. So if you jump back here, you can start a trial here. So if you click this little green button here, you can start a cloud instance right away, or you can download a copy, a trial instance of Octopus Server and install it on your own prem if you so wish. We have new features going into Octopus all the time. Definitely check that out if you're at all interested. I mentioned the roadmap a lot. The roadmap's there to kind of give you a sense of what we're doing, what we're planning to do, and what we're considering. And if you have any feedback, let us know. And then finally, we have our community. Really, really important to mention here. Our community includes our Slack, which has over 6,000 members. Our Slack is where you see a lot of customers posting questions, getting help from our team. Our support team's awesome. We get questions all the time, and most questions are answered, if not within the day, within the hour. Like, we really pride ourselves on our support. And so if you're at all curious, check us out at /community. There you'll see a page like this, and you can check us out if you'd like. And thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate your time and attention for today's 101 webinar. We do these all the time. We do them every month, and maybe we should do one around attendance. So there you go. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Happy to answer them here. Otherwise, if you need to sign off, don't worry, and you'll see a recording of this up on our YouTube channel. I'm not seeing any other questions here, which is fine. Awesome. All right. Well, as we like to say, happy deployments. Thank you again for your time and attention. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care, everyone.